Good afternoon. My name is Cleve Gaddis, and I'm coming to you from Atlanta, Georgia. We appreciate all of you joining us this afternoon for how to take your business plan or how to turn your business plan into an action plan. I'm sure that most of you can relate, maybe not all of you, but we start out the beginning of the year and we have the best intentions and we do all of our business planning. If we're doing it right, we actually start in October of the prior year getting our business plan together for January of the current year. And we have the best intentions and we establish goals and we get everybody a clear understanding of what they're supposed to do to get from here to the goals they have for the end of the year. And then if you're anything like most people out there, the next time we talk about those goals is when we start planning our business plans for the following year. So we don't actually create a business plan and then talk about it consistently throughout the entire year. So that's what we're here to hopefully give you today. You're going to get a real treat. You have two people on today's webinar who are from the Southeast United States, so you'll get to hear double Southern drawl on today's webinar. Hopefully you'll be able to understand the both of us. But again, I'm Cleve Gaddis. I am a team leader. I run a team full of agents here in North Atlanta. I'm also a coach and a speaker for Workman Success Systems. Workman Success Systems is proud to always be involved and to help sort of sponsor and moderate these different panels. Let me get a couple of business things, housekeeping things out of the way to start with. Number one, we invite you to ask questions. There's lots of people on the webinar from all over the country, probably some from Canada as well. And if you want to ask a question, you'll see on your control panel, you'll see a questions tab, and just insert your question. I will be monitoring those questions during the webinar the best I possibly can. I know somebody from RISMedia will also be monitoring. So if it's a technical question or something about where to find the video when it's over, things like that, RISMedia will answer. And if it's something that is appropriate for me to answer during the webinar, or it's more appropriate for one of our panelists or our sponsor panelists to answer, I'll be more than happy to stop the webinar and give them a chance to ask. So I do have a first question there. What are 2 or 3 ways to motivate team members to be more productive? And Rick, the answer is you have to have a big, gigantic whip with the sharper tips or better. It really gets no. We'll get into that, and I think Dan is going to cover some great stuff for you today during the webinar. I also want to make sure that you stay on until the very end. We've got some free giveaways, some free tools. Some of what Dan is going to be talking about, we're going to provide to you as a free tool that you can download at the end of the presentation. So we have 2 people on, first of all from Intuit, and we appreciate Intuit for sponsoring and making this webinar possible. We have Mariette Martinez, who is a speaker and a trainer. You're actually, Mariette, you're a financial accountant, you're an IRS enrolled agent, an Intuit trainer, writer who has worked in the accounting, tax, and technology industries for over 2 decades, which is amazing because based on your picture, it doesn't seem like you could have done anything for 2 decades. It says this blend of experience allows you to create content and spread awareness for the entrepreneurial community around the importance of financial literacy, year-round tax compliance, and embracing technology. So why don't you tell us just a little bit, Mariette, about Intuit and maybe some of the products that Intuit offers that might be appropriate for people who are in the real estate industry. And then if you don't mind, Mariette, since you do so much consulting with small independent business people, I might try to have you included and have you involved in a lot of the discussion during today's webinar, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So first of all, definitely I want to thank everyone on the call, and I'm going to definitely enjoy both of the Southeast voices, so I'm excited about that. My name is Mariette.
You don't have Southern draws in Southern California?
I'm in Southern California, and so I may have some kind of draw, but I don't think it's a Southern draw.
I love it. I think you have the perfect accent.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And yes, I have been in the accounting, technology, and tax preparation world for over 2 decades. I actually started when I was 17. So don't try to do the math. Anyhow, and a little bit about me. So I actually am in what's called the Intuit Trainer Writer Network. So Intuit, as if you don't know already, they're the ones that have created QuickBooks, actually Quicken back in the 80s, which turned into QuickBooks, which is a small business accounting tool. They also have TurboTax, which is a consumer product, and Mint as well. They also have professional products, meaning for accounting, bookkeeping, and tax professionals. They have a tax software that you can use if you have your own tax preparation firm. And then, of course, you can use QuickBooks with your clients. So you can essentially help your clients implement the solution, or the small business owner, the real estate agent, the broker, the investor, dealer, flipper, can go and purchase the product on their own just right online. And so I have been working with Intuit products for over 20 years. I am what's called a QuickBooks Pro Advisor, which means I've been certified in their product for over 20 years. And I'm also in their trainer writer network, which means that it's a small network of less than 200 people globally around the world that essentially create content to create awareness around their product. So teach their products, teach best practices, things like that. And so that's a little bit about me.
So, you know, it's interesting, and we'll talk about this in just a minute, but gosh, in terms of setting a business plan, we all set our sales goals, our production goals, our income goals. But, you know, we probably ought to go ahead and plan 2019's taxes. We ought to plan it at the beginning of 2019. I know we don't know exactly what our income would be, but if we had a financial plan and a budget, I would imagine it would help almost all of us make more money in the end. And we can talk a little bit more about that later, as long as you're okay to continue to chime in. And we do appreciate you and Intuit for sponsoring today's webinar. Let's jump into something. And by the way, for those of you who are listening, we've got a very special guest panelist, Dan Elam. I'll introduce him in just a minute. Dan actually operates a brokerage in Murfreesboro. I always have a hard time saying that. I want to say Murfreesboro, Tennessee, but it's Murfreesboro, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. And he runs his brokerage as a gigantic team. And so some of you might be listening and you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, that doesn't pertain exactly to me because I'm an independent agent. But trust me, all of the concepts that we're going to talk about on today's call, whether you're an independent agent just starting in the business, whether you're an independent agent who's got years worth of experience, or you're a team leader, or you're a broker, or even administrative person, you're going to get tons and tons of good nuggets to take away, to take that initial business plan and to turn it into your action plan throughout the year. I have a question for you, Mariette, if you don't mind, before we get started. And you had no idea that I was going to ask you this, but you know, in late 2017, there were some significant tax law changes that were passed, or maybe it was early 2018 when they passed. And so people are now just filing their tax returns that are incorporating all of those changes in standard deduction, changes in pass-through deductions, things like that. Do you have any feel whether self-employed people are paying a larger percentage of their income in taxes this year or a smaller percentage? And if I'm putting you on the spot and it's not something you can answer, just tell me.
Yeah, no, you're not putting me on the spot. And as a tax professional, I should be ready for those questions. So don't worry about it. I'm good.
Okay.
And so, yes, you're absolutely right. You're referring to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was signed into law on December 22nd, 2017. You know, just something that's really interesting. The IRS loves to sign laws like a week before the end of the year. So no one really knows when it was signed. So it was actually signed in 17, but applicable for tax year 18. And essentially, I want to just mention two very important things. The first thing is that there's no way we can go into tax reform changes specifically right now, because that's could be a 20-hour class. But there's two resources I want to mention, and then I'll answer your question. So the first one is Intuit actually has a specific resource center because of all the questions around the tax reform. You can Google it. I'm going to go ahead and also put it in the chat. It's the Tax Reform Resource Center. And so you can go to the resource center. There's infographics, articles, blogs, videos. You'll probably see some videos of mine on there. And so I just want to go ahead and reference that to you. Secondly, of course, there's tons of other resources out there. There's some really good influencers and experts out there. I just want to highly recommend and suggest that you make sure you are listening to someone that is qualified to be sharing about the law, but they should never be giving tax advice. That needs to be done only by your specific tax professionals. So, but there are tons of people, influencers in the community that have been sharing through YouTube, through Instagram, Facebook, social media. So feel free to go ahead and check that out. And then in regards to have there been significant changes that specifically relate to the business owner, absolutely. The one that everyone is talking about, of course, is called the Qualified Business Deduction. The QBI deduction. That's the one where you could possibly deduct 20% off of your earned income. There's a very complex calculation related to it, but this is a completely brand new deduction called the QBI, also section 199. And that's the one that you really want to know about if you are either a sole proprietor or what's called a pass-through entity, which would be an S Corp or a partnership.
Got it. So, in other words, I shouldn't just assume and take the 20% deduction right off the top of my income just because I want
Absolutely not. No,
because I
please do
want to.
not do that.
Dang,
And
that was part of my business plan. My business plan was
that
just to
cannot be part
only
of your
pay
business
income.
plan.
Okay, all right, okay. Well, and guys, if you're on, thanks for humoring me and let me ask that question. Although it might be something that everybody is interested in, but let's move on with our panelists. And Mariette, we will include you. I'm very excited. We've got Dan Elam on the call with us today. He's a founder of Elam Real Estate in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. He has over 20 years of experience in real estate, has degrees in management and finance from Middle Tennessee University, and he is just an exceptionally good businessman. Dan's a friend of mine. Dan, welcome. I appreciate you giving your time to get on today's webinar and to share with everybody who's in attendance.
Hello, and I appreciate the opportunity to share whatever information I can share. I look forward to it, and welcome everyone to the call. Many times I'm on the receiving end, and it's a pleasure to be on the providing end from time to time.
Well, I appreciate you being on. And since most people who are listening are real estate professionals, if they have some referrals they want to send to Elam Real Estate in the Murfreesboro or the sort of greater Nashville area, I think is the area that you work, how would they reach you, phone and maybe website? How would they reach you?
Sure, thank you. And we do serve the greater Nashville metro area. So all the way from the Kentucky line, really down close to the Alabama line. So it's the center part of Tennessee, the Middle Tennessee area. So they can certainly call our office at 615-890-1222. Again, 615-890-1222. I'm very easy to find online. You can look us up online at elamre.com, elamre.com. We would appreciate that. We treat those referrals, they are highest on my list. So when one of those comes in, we take a position that we are representing you, and you will not be disappointed with the way that we handle referrals. So wherever you're coming from, send them our way, and then we will reciprocate that out in your area. We build a list constantly, and we are constantly adding to that list. So we'd be happy to receive those, and maybe we'll pick up some new people to refer out as well.
Love it. And one of the reasons, Dan, that I wanted to have you on specifically as a guest for this particular webinar, this particular topic, is because you are really a driver of systems. I don't think I've ever met anyone who wanted systems behind everything. And you look at your team differently. So you don't look at it as, hey, I'm going to put a group of people together and I'm going to let them independently drive business through my team. You look at it really as a true partnership between your team and the brokerage, where the brokerage is driving a good bit of what goes on. The team is driving a good bit of what goes on. And then that team agent, that buyer specialist or listing partner is working with the team. In other words, a lot of the communication and stuff is driven directly by the brokerage. So I want everybody to understand that that's the reason you're here. Now, I know at the beginning of each year, you break your sales planning, your forecasting, your business planning into the groups of your more experienced agents and your new agents. So walk everybody through the process of what you do at the beginning of the year to get everybody started with their business plan, or at the end of one year. By the way, when do you do your business planning?
Fourth quarter. You mentioned October. That's always the goal, but in reality, it tends to happen more early December than it doesn't happen as early as we want it to. But the goal is to go into the year with a plan and not be into the year and trying to come up with a plan. You can always adjust or tweak the plan once you get into it, but I worked a lot of years. This is my 27th year in the real estate business. And so the first several of those years, man, I made I know lots of mistakes to make. Let me put it that way. I know lots of things I can tell you not to do. But if you enter the year or really any period of time, I just believe every single thing should be planned. And if you plan it, then the outcome will tend to be much, much better.
So what is the process you walk through with an experienced agent and a new agent? I mean, how does it work? Do you meet with them face to face? Do you give them some tools that they use? How does it work specifically in your brokerage?
Well, you mentioned earlier, kind of a brokerage focus, and I have not always been that way. As a matter of fact, most of my career, I was a team leader, a typical rainmaker. And then when the last company I was with sold, we opened Elam, and we began to look at things a little bit differently. What happens so often, in my opinion, is most of the agents in the business are entrepreneurial type spirits. Not all, but most people.
Right.
And we call them solopreneurs. So they get into the business, well, most of them with completely unrealistic expectations, but they get into the business and they really don't know what to do. And I'm a big believer you need three things to be successful. You got to have the motivation, which most of them coming into the business do have the motivation. Secondly, is you need to know what to do. Well, you can go lots of places and find what to do. But the third one is the real key, is you need to know how to do it. And so what we saw was most of these solopreneurs were struggling, trying to figure out what to do, how to do it. And when we brought them in, my thought originally was, well, look, I've done this for a long time. You'll see me do it, and it'll work out. And that worked well with smaller teams. But when we began to scale that, it didn't work that well because I wasn't in the mix every single day and you couldn't see me. So then we shifted to more of that broker focus. But the way we do it, to answer your question, is, we as a company, and you actually helped with this in 2018, we look at the goals for our company as a whole, and then we look at what we need to accomplish that. So we accomplish that through our agents. So we sat down with each agent in Q4, and we talk to them, and we say, what is it that you wish to accomplish? And I do believe you said something earlier, systems and processes and data, and you're right. I mean, I remember when you and I first connected, you looked at me and said, what do you need all this data for? And I'm like, and you're right. Most of the time people have all this data and they don't use it. I use it every single day. I do believe if anything you're going to do twice, more than once, you better have a system and you better have a process for it. And then you can constantly improve that. So we sat down with our agents. I use an Excel spreadsheet that we have kind of made look pretty.
Okay.
But it's simple. I just start and say, look, it doesn't make any difference whether they're a senior agent or a very new agent. I say, what is your goal this year? And you can tell me if your goal is income, which is what most people's goal is.
Okay.
Some people's goal is numerical. They want to do X number of units. Mm-hmm. And then what I do is I take that number and I plug it in, and I use a number of conversion ratios that we've established through the years that basically take whatever they want to do, and we break it all the way down to what do you need to be doing every single day. I call it reducing it to the ridiculous. If you reduce something to the very, very ridiculous, then people can do it. And if you start off at the beginning of the year and say, well, I want to make $200,000 or whatever the number may be.
Well, and let's say I'm one of your agents, and that is my goal, that I want to make $200,000. So what are the different things that you would actually break down for me? And when you say break it down to the ridiculous, I assume you mean, Cleve, here's what you need to do today. And if you do enough of these days together, if you do enough of the activities today, every day, then you will actually achieve your goal. So what are those things that you break down? I would assume you're breaking down their average earnings per sale.
That's it. So I'll go through them with you. We are going to look at our average closed sales price. That's one thing we look at. Mine last year was $239,000. So our friend in California is going to laugh at that. But that's Middle Tennessee's average sales price. And so we look at our average commission percentage, and that in different parts of the country may be different. But last year mine was 2.87%. And we look at what that average commission is. Then we look at whatever the split is between the brokerage and the agent. And then that gives us the average agent commission amount per sale.
Okay.
Well, I can take that and create a unit production goal from those numbers. I can say, well, okay, if you wanted that $200,000 number and you're making $3,500 a sale, well, then I can back that out and tell you that's X number of units.
Okay.
So that's the top part. Well, then we say, well, that's easy to do, but
right.
how do you do that number? We tell you what to do, but how do you do that? And so we break that down into conversion ratio. So we look and say, okay, well, what is the dial to conversion, dial to conversation conversion? So I believe the phone is the most important item that any salesperson can ever have. And I don't care what you're selling. It doesn't make any difference what we're selling. That telephone is still the most leverage item. Now, I understand social media, and we spend lots of money in social media. My belief system with social media is social media sets you up to a phone call. It's just another way to get you to where you can have more phone calls.
Okay.
But going to the conversion ratios, we're going to look at how many dials do you have to make to have a conversation. Okay.
And what is that? What is that ratio typically in your business, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I don't mind.
You know?
I know all these numbers. Okay. But what I will tell you is I'm focusing, the ones that I did here, I focused on my newer agents, not my senior agents, but my newer agents.
And you're saying that because their conversion rates will be lower, right? Is that why you're
right.
Okay?
I'm always safe if I do that. And my brokerage is set up so that we appeal to newer agents. I'm just the opposite of what most companies do. Most companies don't want new agents. Well, my model is set up to more cater to new agents. So I can tell you my dials to conversation ratio last year was 8.9%. When I look at my younger agents. Now, I can tell you if I bring senior agents in, that gets up to around 20%. But for the number we're using here is 8.9%. The second ratio we look at is, what is the ratio of conversations to face-to-face visits? So in other words, how many conversations do I have to get to a face-to-face? Because that's what we want. We want to get belly to belly. We want to get eye to eye. That's how we sell. Anything else is typically order taking. And so we're in the business of sales. So I can tell you last year with my newer agents, that was 18.6%. So if I know the number of dials I've got to have a conversation, and I know the number of conversations I have to get to a face-to-face, well, the next thing is, how many face-to-faces do I have to get to a pending contract? Right. And that number for my young agents, my new agents last year, was 23%. So that would be 1 out of 4. Now, your more seasoned agent, that's going to go up. It's going to go way up. But again, I'm talking about your agents here. And then lastly, we look and say, okay, well, what is the pending to close ratio? Because what so many people don't think about is, well, wait a minute, I got that on the board. Well, that doesn't mean it's going to close. That just means you got it contracted. We know they fall out for all kinds of different reasons. So last year, they either fell out or were delayed. We actually closed 76.4% on the day it was contracted. Okay. Now, I'll tell you about 8 or 9% of those just rolled, and the rest of them, fell out for some reason. But those are those ratios there that we look at. Well, then we break it down from there, depending on what that number is going to be. We say, okay, what is the activity required to hit your goal? So I give you the ratios up there. Now, what's the activity? So we'll talk
Dan, let me interrupt 1 second. So I want to make sure that everybody is following this. So basically, for a new person, and I've rounded all these numbers, you're saying if you're designing a plan, and I know this might sound like really boring, but the reality is, if we can get our agents, and Rick Crompton, wanted to know, hey, what are the things to do to motivate the agents? Well, we need to motivate them by pushing them to do the activities that are required in order to be successful. And it sounds like you expect them to connect with about 1 in 10 people that they call. You're at 8.9%, so a little higher. We expect them to convert about 1 in 5 to agree to work with them. So if you called 100 people, you expect them to talk to 10. If they talk to 10, you expect them to be able to meet face-to-face with 2. Of those people, you expect them to put about 1 in 4 under contract, and then you expect 3 in 4 of those to close. And what I find is that so many people out there, when they do business plans, they are so unrealistic with their goals that people start out and they have no clear expectation of what they need to do in order to produce X amount of income. So making a couple $100,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 in real estate, unfortunately, the activities that are required to do that are a little bit boring. I want to circle back around for just a second. So, Mariette, I know this is not a tax call, so we can't keep talking about taxing, but what are some of the taxes, but what are some of the business planning things that you do at the beginning of the year to get your business started out correctly, if you don't mind sharing?
No, absolutely not. And just so you know, I was taking notes profusely, Dan. Oh my gosh, that was absolutely phenomenal. I'm going to go back and listen to this recording. I mean, the way you shot out like the plan and then the ratios, and then you were getting into the activity required, and I was like, don't stop talking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I promise we'll go back to it. I promise you, Mariette, we'll get back to him in just a minute.
So let me just tell you a little bit about the plan. So interesting enough, and this was not planned, but I also focus very heavily on the solopreneur community as well. So after 20 years of working with small business owners that made up to $20 million, I realized I really needed to impact the solopreneur, which is usually less than $1 million, and they're on their own. And like Dan said, they're starting on their own, they're entrepreneurial, but many times they are not aware of the planning that's involved. I mean, very heavily planning. And so for the last 5 years, I've focused specifically on that market. So it's fascinating that Dan and I actually focus on the same market, and that wasn't intentional. So the way I actually work with them is a little bit different than the way he works with them. I also do sit them down and we write down the plan. I'm very big about simplicity, KISS, keep it super simple. Usually our plan is just 1 page. And I basically list down the things that are on the plan, but just in a simple way, I say, what is it that you want to do? And then also, how do you want to do it? But I actually introduce them to the concept of the why they want to do it. And I go very heavily into the why, because my solopreneurs live very blended lives. I focus a lot in real estate, but I focus a lot with working parents. And so they are working to support their families. And so we go very heavy onto the why, and that's where their passion comes in. And then we turn that into numbers. We translate that into everything Dan just said, but we don't even get into the numbers. I want to go deep into their core, into their whys first. So that's kind of my strategy.
And I'm sure you hear supporting my family, sending my kids to college, giving my family a different life than I had growing up, all that kind of good stuff. So thank you for sharing. So start with the big why, and I think Dan does that as well, and then back into those numbers. So Dan, once you have the specific numbers that people need to focus on, most people don't do it, but that's actually easy to sit down and give them the numbers. Not everybody will understand the conversion rates, but it's much harder to give them the numbers in the first place and then put overalls on those numbers and make those activities work on a weekly basis. So talk to me about what type of follow-up is done every single week in your business to make sure that the agents are moving forward doing the things that they're required to do.
Well, I'll do that, but I want to jump back for just a minute and speak about what she was just talking about. We do that simultaneously, and I agree with you. Sometimes I'll start with the why very first, because I do believe that. I'm a big Simon Sinek guy, so I believe everything should start with that. So what I ask my agents is, money is just a tool. Just like we have all kinds of tools. So that allows you to have certain things. So at the end of the day, what is it that you really want? So I'll give you an example. So I have one guy here that's a younger guy, and he's like, okay, well, I want to get married next year. Okay, in 2019. I said, okay, well, what has to happen for that to occur? Well, I need to get a ring. He hasn't even asked her yet. So I said, well, how much does the ring cost? Well, it costs this. Well, I want to buy a new car before I get, okay, how much does that cost? Well, I want to be able to buy a house by the end of the year. Well, let's break down. What is the down payment going to be? What are you going to have for that? So we broke all that out and said, well, this is about how much money you need to have. I said, now what I want you to do is to take that and type that out or write that out, and that needs to be in front of you in your desk every single day. Every day when you get up on your hard schedule, which we can talk about hard schedules if you want to later, you need to start.
I'd like to.
You need to start your morning off with writing down what are you working for? What are you doing? I can tell you with me, it's me and Isabel getting to the beach full time and having an adequate amount of passive residual income coming in while we're there. That's why I'm doing everything that I'm doing. Okay. And we've broken that down. We know exactly what that needs to be. And when we get in very difficult periods of time, we remind each other and say, well, remember, this is why we're doing this. So for him, when he gets beat down by no's and difficult situations and problem clients, and he can look at that and say, well, look here, and what I've asked him is this, and this is tough, and I'm not saying everybody can do this. Right. But I look at him and I say this. I say, and it's kind of a guy thing maybe, but I say, is she worth it? Is your future fiance worth you going through what I call the mud and the muck? Is she worth it?
Man, talk about turning up the heat. Whoo, what a question.
Is that not? Think about it. If we strip away all the PC stuff, isn't that really what it's about?
But regardless of what it is, if it's you want to get married, or if it's you're going to save for your future, or you and Isabel are going to get to the beach, you're asking that same question of everything.
Every single thing. It doesn't make any difference what it is. So we do start with that, and then we move over to, okay, well, what has to happen in order to make your why work? And so how do we keep people motivated? I don't know if that was your question or someone else's question, but.
Oh, yeah, that was actually Rick Crompton asked early on, what are 2 or 3 ways to motivate team members? And you're saying, so just continue to use their goal and the question of whether or not it's worth it to sacrifice, if you will, because achieving something significant never comes easy. It's never easy. It's always kind of hard, right?
It's always painful. So, but we have a system for doing that. So every single Monday, I'm a guy that believes coaching, training, mentoring is critical for success, just like accountability is critical for success. If I want to go to the gym and really want to do well, if I'll hire a coach, then and actually I do have one who he's on this call listening today, then he helps hold me accountable. I have to show up. He pushes me to do things that I would not normally want to do. And when it sucks, and when I'm like that third set and I can't get those last few reps, he's like, okay, and he gives me something positive. He picks me up. And so that's what we do to our agents. So we sit down every Monday morning, very short meeting, 15 minutes or so, and we say, okay, well, how did you do last week? Let's pull out our original goal sheet. So it said you needed to make 87 calls a day, $87 a day, or 30, or whatever it was. How did you do? Okay, well, you did this or you didn't do this. What was your outcome? How many great conversations did you have? How many face-to-faces did you get? How many pendings did you get? And you can always, Cleve, always track your outcome to the process. There's never.
And I'm so sorry to interrupt. No. That is totally my fault. But I know there's a lot of people listening say, oh, my gosh, you can't really sit down and do this with people every single week because they don't understand that level of accountability. And they're looking at it thinking that might be a negative thing for all of your people in your office. And I would assume there are some people who don't like that extra level of accountability and they decide they want to go do something else. But number one, do you really, really do it on a weekly basis? And number two, does it help get people back on track who are off track?
Absolutely. Now, so let's talk about that. So we really work to encourage our agents that are not performing at the level they want to perform. If you're rocking and rolling and you don't want that or need that, we don't make you do that. But one of the things that we do on the front end is I look to work with people who believe what I believe. If you don't believe what I believe, we shouldn't work together. And so I believe in accountability.
Fair enough.
Yeah. That's all I'm ever looking for is, who believes what I believe? Because do you like, Cleve, working with people who want to sell their home that don't believe anything. They won't follow your systems. They want to try to cut your commission. They complain. Do you want to work with people like that?
I do not.
No.
I do not.
So let's identify those up front and just say, hey, we don't believe the same thing, and let's keep going until we find the people who believe what we believe. And so we get on the front end, that buy-in, and you would be so surprised when you really dig down deep. People want accountability. Now, do they follow through with it? Well, no, but
Not always.
That's our job. That's management's job and owner's job, is to help hold them accountable. Now, I'm not going to make them show up. We ask them. So Monday morning rolls around, and we're creating habits. So if you get into a habit of meeting Monday morning to evaluate last week, well, guess what? It's just part of your hard schedule. But again,
what you do.
That's just what you do, man. I mean, I don't know about you, but I do certain things when I get up in the morning. I do certain things before I go to bed. I mean, my whole day is structured, and so that's the way that we do it. But if you don't believe in structure and you don't believe in all that stuff, and if you're underproducing, then I'm probably not a great place for you to go to work.
It's interesting because you really want people who love the flavor that you offer. You want them to be there. Speaking of accountability, Ann, who's one of the attendees, has said to us in the questions, please don't forget to go back and talk about the activity required to get the goals. I interrupted you and I went over to Mariette, and then we didn't come back to that. So do you mind if we circle back around, although we're going to run out of time before it's all said and done. Do you mind talking just a little bit about those specific activities that you're pushing people to do?
Yeah. Here's the activities that we do. And Cleve, I don't mind. I actually asked Michael this morning to put this in our shared drive because I thought it might come up. And so you're welcome to share this Excel program out, and they can just change their company name in the middle, change mine out and put theirs there. Oh. But we made this last year, and I love it. But anyway, so activity.
So then let me stop you. Let me stop you 1 second too, by the way, just make sure it's clear. At the end, all of you guys will get a URL, a web address. When you go there in the first place, this Excel spreadsheet that Dan has just mentioned will not be there. But if you go download everything else, I will make sure we send you that Excel spreadsheet sometime in the next couple of days. Dan, that is very generous of you, and I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, and just keep us in mind. You got people in Middle Tennessee, and we'll and if you've got something to share with me, then hey, let's share it. That's kind of the way that I live. Is but anyway, we built this last year, so then we start as far as activity is concerned. So we're going to start and say, well, okay, how many pendings? We're just going to work in reverse. How many pendings are required this year to hit your goal? Well, that's going to be X, based upon the numbers above. And these formulas automatically populate, by the way.
Okay.
Number 2 is going to be how many face-to-face meetings are required this year to hit your goal? Well, guess what? And my good friend Cleve here, one of the things he did for me last year with Workman is he said, look, Dan, I was hyper-focused on I mean, I'm the guy that reduces it to the crazy ridiculous, which is literally how many times do I have to dial today? And Cleve helped say, look, we might want to look at focusing on face-to-face. So we thought about that a little bit and prayed about that and said, you know what, he's 100% right about that. So we've refocused that to where we focus a lot more on face-to-face meetings now. So that is an activity to focus on how many face-to-face meetings do you need to have this year to hit your goal. Next is we're coming back. We're doing just the opposite of we did above. How many conversations do we need to have this year to hit the goal? How many dials do we need to have this year to hit the goal? Then we plug in how many number of weeks are you going to work this year? Okay, so most of the time they're going to put 49 or 50 or whatever, in there. Then the next thing is, because remember, I'm reducing it to the ridiculous. How many days a week do you plan on working? So if you want to do 6 or 5 or whatever you want to do, then when you hit return after that, it's going to tell you the total number of dials required per week, and in red over there, total number of dials required per day. And all you have to do is dial that phone. It doesn't mean if you'll just focus on that number of dials, the ratios are there. It always works out. It just doesn't not work out. When you have a large enough sample size, I mean, I know my dial to my conversion dial to conversation at the low end is 8.9%. I know that. And so as long as they will do that number of dials a day, they're going to hit their numbers. And actually, they exceed their numbers if they do that. And I'll share that, and you guys can. All you do is plug the agent name at the top.
Yeah. So I hope everybody can see it on my screen. Can you see it, Dan? Your spreadsheet, or no?
Let me see. Actually, I did what I usually do when you and I are talking. I ended up pulling something else up, looking for something.
Hopefully, Mariette, can you see his? You can see his spreadsheet?
I can see it perfect.
Perfect.
Yep.
Oh, everybody can see it. They're excited. So I'm going to make sure, again, when you guys go to get this download, it's not there. And I apologize. I didn't know Dan was going to share it with me. I actually didn't have the guts to ask him for it because I thought it was something that was so personal to his business.
I knew you did.
I will make sure that we get that out to everybody else. Can we switch gears just real quickly, because this is so much information, Dan? You and I could go on for hours. I just want to pull the presentation back over, and I know that now this is one thing that we already have there for everybody to share. This will be there for them to download. But can you talk to everybody, talk to the attendees about the best practices? Sort of, this is the way you encourage people to sort of live their work days.
I do. So again, you're seeing, I just have a firm, a solid set of beliefs. I just believe what I believe. And it's through all of these years of doing what I'm doing and interviewing other successful agents and just listening to what other people do and then integrating that into my world and day. And this is what I found that works, and this is what a lot of people have found that works. So if you look at the agent best practices, so when our initial 60-day onboarding plan occurs, we sit down with the new agent and we go over this in detail. And we may go back and revisit this multiple times. And I will tell you, you can ask my agents, if I reference hard schedule once, I reference it over and over and over, because I believe if you do not have a schedule and you do not write whatever you need to happen, it will not happen. Just as simple as that. I don't care what you say, it will not happen consistently. Will you do the next one or today? Yes, but not over a year. It won't happen. So
well, life gets in the way. Life gets in the way. So even if your intentions are great, you wake up and something gets you off track and you won't get back to it sometimes. I got a couple of questions from attendees. Number one, Renee wants to know, is a face-to-face meeting talking about knocking on doors? So can you clarify that?
No. So we don't count that. So a face-to-face meeting with us, and there's two types of face-to-face. We track them all. There is a new face-to-face, and then there is a reoccurring. So it's not uncommon that you meet a new client and then, you show them a house or two, or you do a consultation with them. Well, then you're going to come back a second time or a third time. But a true new face-to-face is if I meet them at the door, or I meet them a better example for us may be an open house. So a lot of you may do open houses. So you may do an open house, have 20 couples come through, you meet all 20, maybe you get information on 10 of them or 5 or whatever it is. So your first face-to-face would be the second time you met that person, because that person did not schedule exclusively a face-to-face with you. They just come to see the house. So you don't know if you don't know where they're at.
Right.
So, and the same thing with knocking on doors. If you're doing that, we don't count that first encounter. And I don't know if that makes sense, but we don't count that.
Well, you're counting it when they have an opportunity to be alone with someone, to get to know them, to present, your business and what they offer and how they help them in the buying process, that kind of thing. So, yeah, so Renee says, so it's an appointment. So, yes, it is a face-to-face appointment when you get the opportunity to present your business and yourself and your process for helping people and all that kind of good stuff. Susan also has asked, can we please get copies of these forms and the agent's best practices? And the answer is yes. And and I know we had Michael put in, hey, make sure you email a copy of these documents to my email address. And in order to get these, you're going to have to go to the URL at the end of the call to download them, and then we will automatically go back and send you a copy of the spreadsheet that Dan has been using as well. So Dan, I want to go back and talk just real quickly if we can here, and I know we're jumping all over the place. You try to make sure that your agents stay focused on only 4 of what you consider to be the 42 steps involved in helping somebody buy or sell a home. Talk to us a little bit about that, and how does that help them stay focused on the activities that are required for success?
So that's one of the 3 big rocks with Elam Real Estate. I think it's one of the 3 big differentiators with our company. And again, you introduced me by saying we run this more as a team on a firm chassis, and that's what we do. So okay. I believe if we can I believe one of the big reasons people in the real estate industry average such extremely low incomes is they attempt to do every aspect of the business themselves. And so many years ago, I went back and identified 42, bigger steps to have a successful real estate buy or sell. Okay. But only 4 of them are the highest money producing activities. So what I want to do is to have our agents focusing on the highest money producing activities. And that's one of the reasons we believe our agents make 3 times the money as the average agent in my market does. And that's my average agent. That's not my top agent. My top agents are way above, but my average, so when I look at the bottom and bring them all together, they're making 3 times the industry average. And so those are, like I said, those 4 top money producing items.
And so is that done really in an attempt just to make sure your agents can stay focused and have less excuses? Look, you need to show houses, you need to negotiate offers, you need to attend closing, whatever those things are. Is that so that they can be more successful long term?
Sure. Not only them, because our company is successful when our agents are successful. So I look at this as the agents that work with us are my clients. I serve them. And so I take the attitude of always having a servant's, approach to everything in life. So, I want to serve them. And so by taking everything off of their plate, so all of the listing items, activities, and all that is done for them. All of the marketing, the advertising, the CRM, the lead generation, all of that's done for them. All of the closing, all of that is done for them. My managers, they don't sell against them. None of my staff, none of those people sell real estate, which is the opposite of most companies, where most managing brokers, sales managers, because the company doesn't pay them enough money, so they have to go out and sell that. Well, I don't want that. I want the customer experience to be so amazing. When that customer leaves, and I tell every one of them when I sit down with them, or when you sit down with them, you need to tell them what your objective is. Your objective is when the sale is over with, they walk away with a wow, saying, "My goodness, they exceeded my expectations." And you can look at our reviews, you can talk with our people. And, we're not perfect. We make mistakes all the time, but that is the goal, is for them to focus on those 4 things, which create more income for them, which creates a better experience for the consumer. My agents are happy. They don't have to, do all the crazy stuff. Who wants to figure out what the algorithms for Google PPC are this month? Or Facebook?
Not me.
Think about it. How do you want it? Who's out there evaluating lead sources and says, where do I need to advertise? What's the difference between branding and direct? Who's doing all that? Well, guess what? I have a department that's all they do every day. And so my agents don't have to do that. My department hands them over and says, well, look at the statistics we did. Well, when we can sit down with home sellers and say, well, do you understand that Elam homes are looked at 3.5 times more than any other entity in Middle Tennessee? Well, you think that's a good listing tool? I think
absolutely. Absolutely. Ann asked the question, what are the 4 steps specifically? And I think number 1 is they're always in business development. They're setting appointments. Number two, they're getting face-to-face with clients, either in your car showing homes or, selling services with listings or getting buyer agreements or whatever. And then I think that might be two right there. And then I think one of your other four is you require them to be doing a certain amount of personal development all the time. Is that right?
That's exactly it. You hit the four and there's really three. We just break out. Either you need to be in front of people buying or you need to be in front of people selling. And so, like you said, business development on the front end, which is on the phone lead setting, aka prospecting. Nobody likes that word.
Right.
And then on the back end is you constantly got to put yourself in an environment that you are skilling yourself up. And if you don't, we live in such a fast-paced world and industry, and if you're not keeping up with what's going on, I just believe it's an unfair scenario for our consumer, and I believe we're cheating our consumer, and I don't want that. My name is on the front of the building, and I want to make sure the experience that everyone has, whether they're inside our office or outside our office, is an amazing experience.
I love it. I love it. Mariette, in your consulting, what are the biggest flaws that you see that keep people from putting a business plan at the beginning of the year into an action plan all throughout the year? Do you have any insights on that?
Yeah, I mean, well, honestly, I'm blown away by all of this information. But yeah, I mean, I think he hit the target perfectly. It's really development. It's really, for whatever reason you got into the real estate business or whatever business as an entrepreneur, like you need to continuously develop yourself, develop your skill set, and be aware of what you need to do. And a lot of times, honestly, it's that they're just not aware and they just hit the road running and they don't plan, which is what today was about, and they think they're going to be successful. It's not going to happen. And so you need a plan, you need to write it down, you need to be intentional.
It's not accidental. I bet you do that too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the thing is these, I love this community, especially the real estate community, but entrepreneurial in general. They're so spirited, and they have usually some really powerful whys, but that's not enough. Like, that's not enough. You need to develop yourself, and you need to continuously develop yourself. And obviously, everybody on the call agrees with that, and that's why they're here.
And Dan, and thank you very much, Mariette. I appreciate your insight. That you provide a tremendous amount of training. So the last thing I want to talk about before we get over into the free giveaways and helping people understand how to get those giveaways, talk about all of the training that you provide. 330 hours, that sounds like a ton over the period of a year.
So the average industry is 30 hours, is what most is mostly offered, and I think that's crazy. I think I don't get that at all. So every day in my office, there's going to be a learning opportunity available. So Wednesdays is a required day. That's our quote unquote sales meeting, but there's a 30-minute educational component of that. But every day, now I'll just tell you how mine works. It's probably in here. Every day at 8:55, we're going to gather at the front desk. Whoever's here, okay? If you're here, you're here. And if you want to, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. I'm going to speak for 2 or 3 or 4 minutes on some stat, some topic, something that happened recently. And then we open our day up with a prayer. We believe getting God on our side for the day is the best thing we can do. So you don't have to participate in that at all, but if you want to, you can. From there, we go into the conference room, and there is a topic that we talk about. We just talked about Monday is an accountability day. So Tuesday is a motivational day. Wednesday is our sales meeting. Thursday is our scripts and dialogue meeting. So we're going to practice scripts. And then Friday is a miscellaneous day. We do all kinds of things. A lot of times Friday is tech day, but our sales manager will bring whatever he wants to bring in on that day. But every single day there is a class that goes on for whoever wants to attend. That's what
330 hours. Mariette, how would you like to work at a place that gave you 330 hours worth of training and development every year?
I would be very happy. That's my life's mission, is to educate. So I'm there.
And you're doing that anyway for everybody, and I totally love that. Dan, thank you so much for sharing so genuinely and openly. I really, really appreciate that. And thank you very much for allowing us to share that spreadsheet. I will get it to the powers that be in Salt Lake City so that they can send these out to everybody who requests the free gifts. We do have some stuff already set up for you. And Mariette, you can have copies of these as well. All you do is go to workmansuccess.com/action plan. So I'll make sure you get that written down, Workman Success, and that's Workman Success Systems. We're a company that coaches some of the largest teams in the country. We actually coach Dan Elam and Elam Real Estate and help him put together his systems and plans. And not that you're going to have any interest or have any need to talk to Workman Success Systems now, but if you feel like your business is at a point and maybe you'd like to take it to another level, that's sort of what Workman Success Systems specializes in, is helping people get their business to the next level. So if you think there's something out there more for you, you might want to reach out and request a coaching consultation. But here's what you're going to get when you go to workmansuccess.com/action plan. You're going to get a copy of today's presentation, the whole thing start to finish. And I did honestly skip over a couple of slides. Dan had such great information. Dan, maybe we'll have you back on as another guest and we can sort of do round 2 of this one if you're okay doing that. We're going to give all of you a so somebody wants us to type the link in. So Peter, if you'll go in and actually type in the link for them so they can have it, workmansuccess.com/action plan. But you'll get a copy of the daily success habits form, which is what Workman Success Systems teaches to keep people focused on the activities they need to do in order to generate a certain amount of business. And long story short, we've proven over the years that if you have 147 points, you'll get a listing appointment. If you have 77 points, you'll get a buyer appointment. And when you break it down to the ridiculous, as Dan mentioned earlier, it makes all the difference in the world. You've also got a copy of the full, and this is about a 25-page business plan workbook, which works a new agent or an experienced agent start to finish. How do they come up with their mission? What are their conversion numbers? What are their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities, and their threats? All the different things they need to do from a planning standpoint. And then we've got for you daily best practices that is what you heard or saw Dan going over for you today. Mariette, thank you so much for being a guest. You have an unequaled level of enthusiasm, and I appreciate you bringing that to the call. Dan, I appreciate you sharing all of your information. And for those of you who download the free giveaways, don't worry, it might take a day or two, but we will get you a copy of Dan's spreadsheet. Thank you so much for everybody being on today's call. We hope you got at least 1 or 2 things that you can put to place in your business to turn that business plan into an action plan and to make more money by closing more sales. Take care and have a great afternoon.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.